Tonight on Reporting Scotland. Cladding similar to that used in Grenfell Tower has been found in more than 50 privately owned properties in Glasgow. Holyrood votes for the principle that income tax should go up. A mother fighting to find out what happened to her dead baby's body speaks of her hopes of government help.
We want my son back and we want to be able to give him a Christian burial. So my hope is that Aileen will quite simply put the pressure on where it's needed.
Also on the programme, Mark Beaumont returns home as the fastest man to cycle the world. We'll be talking to him live. And marking the 50th birthday of the Clyde-built luxury liner, the QE2. Good evening. Cladding, similar to that used in Grenfell Tower, has been found in more than 50 privately owned properties in Glasgow. Council officials haven't revealed the locations, but they insist there is no need for people to panic. Checks on buildings throughout the UK have been taking place following the Grenfell blaze, in which up to 80 people died. Here's our reporter, Aileen Clark.
This session of Holyrood's local government committee started on a positive note this morning.
It would appear, and I stress, it would appear that no high-rise in Scotland has the combustible material or the systems that were discovered at Grenfell that led to that dreadful tragedy.
But it then emerged in Glasgow, checks of cladding on privately owned flats has found some aluminium composite material, the kind of cladding being investigated after the devastating fire at Grenfell Tower.
That information we only managed to complete in the last couple of weeks, and I've passed that information over to to the ministers via the Building Standards Division.
So combustible cladding has been found in some private properties.
Yes.
Then?
It's just not public information yet.
Right, so it's now public information.
Absolutely.
It exists because you're telling us.
Oh, no, absolutely. It's because I'm simply responding to the question, but I would prefer not to go into the details of the properties, if you understand.
Since the Grenfell blaze in June, councils around the country have been checking the cladding used on their high-rise buildings. The revelation this morning of what's been found in Glasgow prompted more questions about safety.
Has the Scottish Fire Service been in to see each individual property as a matter of priority?
No, because at the moment because the process we've been asked to go through is to notify the ministers about that, and that's what we've done.
Have you notified the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service?
No, because we're simply waiting to see what the Scottish ministers wish to do with that, because I know that the ministerial working group and that the measures, that the meetings they will have will include the Scottish Fire Service within that.
So what is the Scottish Government doing about the report into these Glasgow buildings? Well, they're asking more questions.
It did not identify amount of buildings or whether any of the cladding used in those buildings was of a Grenfell type. And the Chief Building Standards Officer contacted Glasgow City Council for clarification. And we still await clarification to see exactly what is going on there.
Well, Aileen Clark is outside Glasgow City Chambers for us this evening. Aileen, I think clarification is the word. Are things any more clear tonight?
Well, yes, this afternoon Glasgow City Council issued a statement. Now, what they're saying in this is that they've identified 57 privately owned buildings which had some element of this cladding material on it. Now, they're saying a small number of those 57 had quite a substantial amount of that cladding material on them. Now, the thing is, though, that is affecting potentially hundreds of families, because each of these buildings will have more than one flat in them. So this could be a problem on quite a large scale indeed. Now, they're also saying, though, that there's no suggestion these buildings are a particular fire risk, and they're trying to reassure people that, that is the case.
And the fact, Aileen, that these properties haven't been identified, though, it's not going any way towards allaying any concerns.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I've tried to piece together, which properties these might be in Glasgow, because they wouldn't tell the committee today and the council aren't telling us tonight. But what we do know about this is these are flats that would have been built before the regulations about cladding changed in 2005. So they must have been built before 2005, and though there's talk about high-rise is anything over 18 metres, so it could be flats that are maybe 5 or 6 storeys high. The council are saying tonight that with assistance from the Scottish Government, they're going to be writing to all the people that own these properties as soon as possible and letting them know the situation.
Aileen, thank you very much for that update. MSPs have voted for the principle that income tax should go up, with SNP members abstaining. Labour, Liberal Democrat and Green MSPs were in favour, Conservatives against. SNP ministers have yet to decide their tax policy for next year. Here's our political correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
Health and social care, school and nursery education, policing and the courts, bin collections and other local services, all hungry for Scottish Government funds. But would you be willing to chip in a bit more in income tax to better fund these services?
You know what, if it went up, it went up. It's just obviously one of those things.
Providing it does go to the NHS or social services, I don't mind at all.
I think we're paying enough tax already, I think so. And I think if the tax are being used properly, and I don't know, look at the NHS. There's a lot of waste in the NHS.
Those competing arguments are echoed here at Holyrood, which now has full control over income tax rates and bans. So far, devolved tax policy hasn't diverged much from the rest of the UK. But Labour says it's now time for Scottish taxes to go up. They want a penny on the basic and higher rates and a new 50p rate for top earners.
It is time once again to make the case for a tax rise, for those who can pay a bit more to do so through a progressive tax system.
Greens want to cut tax for lower earners and make the better off pay more.
And we believe that there is a need to raise more revenue in Scotland than is currently being raised in order to achieve the quality of public services people expect and demand.
And Liberal Democrats favour increases too.
It's a limited proposal of a modest penny on income tax worth £500 million, which would invest in education.
But the Conservatives don't want ministers to heed this tax-raising advice.
You have plenty of money, Cabinet Secretary, you just choose not to be wise in how you spend it. And before you start raising more money from hard-working Scottish families, start using the money you've got better.
Ministers say they're open-minded, but seem to recognise the need to find more cash from somewhere.
We know that in the face of continued Westminster austerity, the consequences of Brexit and demographic change, there will be increasing pressure on those public services.
And when it came to the vote on putting up tax,
yes 33, no 30.
Parliament backed the idea in principle, but without SNP members picking a side.
I will play the guitar, you say.
No thanks.
The First Minister doesn't want to strike the wrong chord. She's promising a discussion paper exploring options in the hope of achieving greater harmony at Holyrood on tax. Glenn Campbell, reporting Scotland.
The Public Health Minister has pledged to help an Edinburgh woman find out what happened to her dead baby's body after an emotional meeting at Holyrood. BBC Scotland revealed earlier this month that Linda Reid had her son's coffin removed from its burial plot, but no remains were found inside. Our health and social care correspondent Shelley Joffrey has more.
So many questions. After the shock of discovering her baby's coffin never held a body, Lydia Reid arrived this afternoon with her other son in search of answers.
We want my son back, and we want to be able to give him a Christian burial. So my hope is that Aileen will quite simply put the pressure on where it's needed.
Hi there, nice to see you. In a private meeting, the family told Aileen Campbell about their 4-decade quest for the truth.
The pathologist who carried out the post-mortem 42 years ago might have been able to provide some answers about what happened to baby Gary's body. Sadly though, he died at the start of this year. The one person who must know for sure though is the undertaker who carried out the burial.
Finding that person will be central to the ongoing police investigation. Until it concludes, all the Public Health Minister could offer was a sympathetic ear.
We've committed to keep in touch with Lydia to make sure that the questions that she has at the right point we can try and locate the right answers. But I think what she's had to endure is absolutely heartbreaking, and it was an opportunity for us to express our deep condolences.
Lydia Reid fears the answers may be painful and won't come quickly.
I think we've got a long fight ahead. I have every confidence that he has been used for research in some way. It's what and how that's my concern.
Lydia Reid hopes the Scottish Government's involvement will now focus minds and eventually bring some closure. Shelley Joffrey reporting, Scotland, Holyrood.
A woman has died following a car crash in Murray, which left another 3 people in hospital. A former Aberdeen councillor says he feels vindicated after the release of findings of a report into public money spent repairing a wall owned by his father. Willie Young lost his seat in May's local council elections after the controversy flared just days before polling. Well, Rebecca Curran is in Aberdeen and can tell us more. Rebecca.
Yes, Jackie. Well, the wall has since been rebuilt, the repairs have been done, but it seems that the fallout to this may continue. Aberdeen City Council admitted to a serious failing by officers earlier this year after repairs costing around £200,000 were ordered here without proper committee approval. It was to be paid for by cycling charity Sustrans. Now, as you say, it then emerged that the land was owned by the former City Council's finance convener, Willie Young's father. Now, all of this played out in the run-up to the local government elections in May, which saw Councillor Young eventually lose his seat. Today, Aberdeen City Council published its investigation into why proper procedures weren't followed. Now, the investigation is being described as Operation Arthur. Parts of it are redacted. There's also an appendix which we won't get to see, but we do see a number of findings. It points to a failure in governance, including insufficient supervision and record keeping. It says that there was a number of opportunities to present this to committee. Obviously, that wasn't done. It said there are no records kept of what actions were taken and why, and also that it wasn't possible to determine a single point of failure in relation to how officers dealt with this. Well, we got the reaction of the former finance convener, Willie Young, a little earlier.
It's vindicated my position. I always said it was an SNP dirty tricks before an election. I stand by that. I never owned the wall at the time, and of course what's happened is that council officers have not done the job that they were supposed to do.
There is a lot of unanswered questions still to be answered. Bearing that in mind, I think it's absolutely appropriate that we take the next step, which is to move this to Audit Scotland, let them as an independent authority investigate the findings and indeed the investigation report which has taken place.
Well, the former councillor Young says that he is still considering legal action. This investigation will be scrutinised next week by a committee at Aberdeen City Council, and Audit Scotland could yet take action on this as well.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. The Education Secretary, John Swinney, has insisted he'll press on with reforms in the country's schools. In a speech to head teachers and other senior figures in education, he argued he wanted to give more power to teachers and schools to do what they thought was right to raise attainment. A bill at Holyrood in the coming year should give schools and heads more official powers, but unions still want to know more about what it will mean in practice. To suffer a miscarriage during IVF treatment is a devastating experience. But for 79 days, Mark Beaumont got on his bike at 4 a.m. and pedalled for almost 240 miles, a journey which saw him become the fastest man to cycle the world. Now to someone else who's well-travelled. She's the poster girl of the Clyde, an icon of the shipbuilding industry, and today marks the 50th anniversary of the launch of Ship 736, which we all know better as the QE2. Now, Scotland, as you know, is renowned as the home of golf. As you can see, I'm back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from everyone here, good evening.